Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live chat here with the Bush Bee Man. We're lucky to have Christopher Palmer join us today from across the other side of the world in the USA, where this jolly little Varroa mite has been around for 20 or 30 years. They've got some experience to share with us and with me. And what's more, you're going to get to find out what Chris has got to say. He's been keeping bees for close to 20 years in Kentucky. Well, there's an interesting part of the world. I tell you what, I don't know too much about America, but I know it's a big place and I know there's a lot of bees. And Chris has been playing around with them for 20 years, so that's pretty cool. I reckon we'll find out some stuff that we didn't actually already know. Chris, welcome to the show, champ.
Hello, Mark. Thank you so much. Glad to be
Oh,
here.
oh, it's awesome to have you. I tell you what, you're in the other. We're just going into summer, and you're just coming out. I would imagine.
Yep. Just coming out, going into fall, waiting for the cool weather to set in, getting bees ready.
Oh, it's unreal, isn't it? So what sort of temperatures does Kentucky get down to during the winter?
Well, of course, I'm not going to be able to speak in centigrade, so you'll just have to
That's,
convert it to Fahrenheit.
that's all right.
Right now we're running, 70, 80 degrees.
Right.
We do get some lows at night down 50s, close to, we do dip into some 40s. So it's just kind of a roller coaster ride, and that'll last all the way through, October into November, maybe. So every year's different.
Isn't that the truth? Golly gosh, it's amazing how that works. I find that every year is different, and you think you've got it all sorted. The last year, you check your notes and you go, "Cool, this is going to be amazing," and then it's like, "Nah."
Yeah.
The trees have done something stupid, or the weather's gone weird, or
that's like this year. So everything was 2 weeks ahead, and I was 2 weeks behind, and the bees were 4 weeks ahead. So it's been behind the eight ball the whole time.
Oh, that sounds like my life. That was me last year. I was like chasing swarms and running out of boxes, and I'm like, "Oh, this is just ridiculous. Just stop and wait for me." But they don't.
I remember those days.
Oh man,
gave up chasing swarms.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm really the swarm rescuer now. I'm not really that fussed. It's just that some people don't know anybody else to call, so I get the call, and it's like, oh, okay, here we go.
Right.
On that though, with catching swarms, I was wondering, with this jolly Varroa mite, obviously in Australia we're going to have it in the environment, and so we won't know where the swarms comes already. Now, usually if I catch a swarm, I've obviously got them in an isolation yard until I find out if they've got any other viruses and stuff. Do you sort of check a swarm if you do bother to catch one, or you just don't bother at all and figure it out later on, or what's the go?
We do the same thing that you're talking about, isolate them. But the great thing about a swarm, unless you're putting, the majority of our Varroa mites are within the brood. For every mite you see, there's 3, maybe 4 inside of a cell. Well, if you're starting them on foundation, a great thing you can do is use phoretic, with the phoretic mites or the mites on the bees, is use oxalic acid vapor to knock all those mites off and get them relatively clean. But the majority, I think, of the mites will be on your nurse bees, or the bees that are confined to the hive. And I don't normally sacrifice 300 bees and check a swarm. Although, if you had a 9-pound swarm, I guess it wouldn't be too bad to do a biopsy that way, just to have an idea. But more often not, because we're not checking nurse bees, it's probably not going to be real accurate, So
right, yeah, that makes sense.
But I isolate them and then go from there, And
for sure. That's a good idea, though, to treat them whilst they're like early, before they've actually started laying up. That would make perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's just a good practice.
Yeah, it's a bit like a lot of things we're going to have to learn down here, because we're just, you can read all the reports you like. I find one thing I thought was interesting. I was reading an article that was posted, I think, about a year and a half ago, about what's going to happen to the Australian bee industry with Varroa mite and the doom and gloom that they were predicting. And now they're putting a happy little face on it and going, we'll be right. We're resilient. We'll make it happen. Don't get too panicked. And I think, man, okay.
Well, that's exactly right. There's no reason to panic. we've already done all the panicking for you. So, just kind of learn from our mistakes. It's,
Yeah.
really what it boils down to, Mark, is um, now you're going to have to manage bees. You have to, you don't have that you're going to be on a timeline is essentially what it comes down to. And
Yeah.
you're going to manage bees and you're going to manage mite populations. And, it's just like any other livestock, I'm not familiar with, I know you guys raise a lot of sheep over in Australia and what have you. And I'm sure there's husbandry that you follow, and it's the exact same thing. That's, it's just a managing bees in the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah, for sure. Someone was likening it to a little bit like worming your cattle. Like
Absolutely.
you treat your cattle, you do the worming, and then you knock the population off inside the cow. But of course, then they eat some grass, and away we go around again. But at least you've reduced the numbers, so they don't suffer so much.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, with the Varroa mite, and I said to John, I'm so glad that you all had Dr. David Peck on before me, because he can speak to a lot of things, and he's a phenomenal wealth of information. But something that I caught in your all's exchange was the virus loads. The more mites you have, the higher the virus loads, and that's the demise of your bees. Is you just have them so high that So if you control the mites, you control the virus loads, and therefore raise your percentages of being effective and being a good beekeeper and keeping the bees, being
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the situation so far. I'm just wondering, I guess in history stakes, do you know what the average losses were until us beekeepers and the bees adjusted to the mites?
I would say in some, and I'm might be speculating just a little bit, but I wouldn't doubt there to be 50% losses. But with knowledge and research and what have you, we've raised that up to about a 30% loss.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and it's all about gaining knowledge and learning, and and if you can plan for a 30% loss and make yourself 30% more nukes to pull from, you're
Yep.
really not losing anything, if
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
maintain that. So
Yeah.
that's sustainable beekeeping. And that's what we try to promote, around here. So,
Yeah, I guess that's one thing about bees, at least. I remember back in the day when I was running around trying to figure out how to get some bees. And then after a little while, once you figure out that once you've got some bees and you like some ladies that you want to multiply, that's not that complicated to increase. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's the other way. You're going, would you stop it already?
yeah, that's true. Well, and that's when you were talking about swarms, in the time it takes me to go get a swarm, I can walk out back and make a swarm. And
Exactly right.
it's a
And you
lot
know
easier.
and you know what their geology is going to be. They're actually going to be half sensible.
That's
Sometimes
right.
you catch a swarm and you go to work them in a month's time and you look, mate, they're out of control.
Coming at you with pitchforks. Yeah, no
Exactly.
doubt. No
Yep, yep.
doubt.
You know you're in trouble if your jolly beekeeping gloves have got more white dots from the stings than
That's right.
and you think this is not going well.
No, not at all. But
No. So how did you
absolutely.
get into beekeeping? Is that a like
Well, I guess how I got into beekeeping is I had an uncle um, in my hometown. Him and his son-in-law ran a little beekeeping operation. They were one of the prominent figures in the community. As far as bees, everybody knew them. And
yep.
one day he asked me if I'd like to go catch a swarm with him, and I was like, "Yeah, why not?" And so he took me to go catch this swarm. Well, he took one box and he looked at me, and I'm just amazed at all these bees flying around. Right. And he
Yep.
says, I'm going to need another box. I'm like, okay. He's like, well, I want you to stay here. And I think he did that on purpose. And of course, I have no idea what's going on. All the bees flying around. I'm just watching them. He's gone for what seemed like 3 hours. It was about maybe 25 minutes. He comes back with another box. And I watched those little gals just march right into the box and was just totally amazed. And I said, Uncle Donald, I think I would like to do this. He said, well, I'll get you a box. Next swarm I get, we'll go get it. And that's how it all started. And it's progressed from that point. And
it is amazing when you catch a swarm and they do that walk-in part. It's pretty incredible, and they'll bunch up the front and have a big argument about who's getting which sweet.
That's right.
It's definitely addictive. That's for sure.
It is addictive, and there's a peace to be had when you go out and you work the bees, and you're out with nature. You're seeing things evolve before your eyes, and watching multiple bees being one organism, and it's amazing. And it's amazing what they can do.
And I think the other thing that amazed me, like when I got into the bee world, and how much more of nature you do actually notice around. Like you start looking around and you start thinking, oh yeah, that's flowering, this is going on.
Right.
I wonder what, you give the blossoms a shake to see if there's any nectar in there. Now I never would have whacked a flower on my hand before I was a beekeeper.
No, I'm with you. You do. You become more in tune with nature and how things work, and what's going on around you, your neighbors, what they're doing. And I know you found the beekeeping community is quite a nice place to be. Everybody's always that wanting to lend a hand. Can I help you with something? And and it's a resource to help you get along. And so I was so glad to be invited and be a part of your community. And I welcome that open arms. But
it's that's the coolest thing. I was like talking to the other day, and what was he saying? He was talking about, where was he? He was in Morocco, I think. And he said he couldn't speak because they were speaking French there, and he couldn't speak the language. But as soon as they were working the bees, they didn't need to speak actually, because you were speaking bee language. So you're in the hive, and everybody was looking at the queen or the brood nest, or talking, looking at the larvae and going, and basically knowing what you were saying, even you weren't using the same English or French or whatever the language was, which is quite amazing.
Well, that's the success of beekeeping. We're all doing the exact same thing. We're keeping good queens. We keep our mites low, and we keep what they have nutrition. They're going to thrive. They're going to do great. And you're constantly managing. And we can speak to one another because we all understand those things. Yeah.
No, exactly right. I usually say there's like 50 to 60% that you have to do the same, and then there's probably 40% of like what kind of works for where you are in your environment.
Yeah, and it's beekeeping is geographical. It has to do with temperatures, how long your seasons are, the terrain, the flora. There's so many different factors, but if we all follow the same basic things of beekeeping, the 65%, we can still be successful.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, no. So I guess there is still a reasonable amount of fear down here in Oz, because we're looking at this new incursion happening to us all, and we're looking at it and going, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And so, but I look at it and I think, well, the rest of the world's moved on and marched forward. I'm probably concerned about the immediate little bit, this next couple of years, I guess 2 or 3 years, until we basically get all the wild colonies sort of either destroyed or adapted a bit. And as that was, I guess it's a bit of a memory trip, but I was kind of wondering about the reinfection from the actual wild swarms or wild colonies.
I think everything kind of equalizes for you. The wild colonies probably won't thrive because they can't be managed. The managed colonies will do well, and then it's hopefully mite resistance kind of takes its place in the feral colonies and what have you. You start seeing that start to build. Of course, it's never going to happen probably in our lifetime, but over the years, bees are resilient, and then they'll do good.
Yeah.
I think one of the topics I'll say, Mark, because I really think it's important. One of the topics that is most important in combating mites is doing mite counts. Monitoring Monitoring is probably the most essential part of it, of anything that we do. And I've heard you speak to, the alcohol wash. I found that to personally be the most effective, and I think most people. But, we're learning now that maybe, during the season when we're able to get in our bees, be checking them once a month,
Mm-hmm.
even, especially before a treatment. You check to see if they need a treatment, because why treat them if you don't need to and spend the money to treat them? But you got to come back and keep monitoring to know when to treat them. Once they reach that, we have like a 3% threshold is kind of what the rule of thumb is. And when you reach that, treat them. But then you got to come back after that treatment and make sure that that treatment worked. That's important. And I can't hit home the monitoring. That's that's the key.
Yep. Yeah,
get them before they get sick.
Yeah, exactly right. But get them before the numbers get too high and you're already got problems.
Yes.
When you're monitoring, say how many bees do you have? Like how many hives in a drop spot or whatever you want to call it, an apiary?
As you know, the more bees you have, the more difficult it is to check every one of them. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, I have went through when we were sitting at 60, I went through and mite washed every one of them, and it's a long process. But I say this because I think it's probably really important. How do we know if we have bees that are resistant to mites? If we're just overall treating them all, how do they progress? Mm-hmm. So, I'm fortunate because I keep my yards kind of small, and I don't keep a lot of. I got 7 different yards, but I keep them kind of small. So I might hit 25% of them, down a row or down a line or whatever have you, to know exactly about where am I at. But when you skip over that one, that might be the one that I probably should have checked, because I'm if I'm going to treat it, that it's a lot of work. It's extra work, but you learn how to manage it.
Yeah. So. On that, because there's quite often when I drive through the apiary, and you can do a little bit of a recon out the front of the hive and have a bit of a look at them and think, oh yeah, they're doing this and they're doing that. And is there any sort of drive past that obviously you still got to do all the washes and checks, but is there like a telltale sign that maybe you look at a hive and go, oh, I better check that one because she's maybe more likely? Well, not.
I haven't. I mean, I walk through, I open the lid, I look at my cluster size. For me, there's no drive by, because every colony I have has a different personality. Some of them a little more hotter personality than others. And
I know that feeling.
Right. And so, you got to look. If you got a colony that doesn't look like it's building very well, check it for mites. I made some mistakes over the years. I had colonies coming out of winter that just struggled, and I just kept adding bees to them. I got to make a super of honey. And then I turn around and they just would not do anything after I took the honey supers off. And so I mite washed them. And these things were just loaded. For 300 bees sample, I got 50 mites or more in an alcohol wash. And that's crazy. And there were 10 colonies in that yard. Before it was all said and done that year, I lost 6 out of those 10.
Wow. Yeah,
and all I had to do was check them that spring. Well, that was a learning curve for me. And, you got to stay on it. You just got to stay.
As you say, keep checking and keep monitoring.
Yep, absolutely. It's nonstop.
Yeah, gosh, little monsters.
They are. They are. God, but they're good at what they do. I say the mite is good at what it does.
Well, it's basically made its way around the planet, and it's blind and it can't fly. I mean, that's not a bad effort.
No, not at all. What were you going to ask?
I was just. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten what I was thinking. It's whoosh out the back of my head. It's not too bad, is it?
No. What else was I going to say? Monthly sampling. and you may find that through the seasons, you might be treating some way, shape, and fashion or form through every season. Not necessarily every colony, but maybe you've got some on a regimen of spring and fall. Some will fall, but you only know that by monitoring what you're going to do. I mean, it's just, I guess the big thing they're turning to management practices maybe there. Um, you'll have some sort of tools to work with, you know. Um, there's I know here in the States, we have Apivar, which is Amitraz. You have Apigard, which is the thymol based product. You have formic acid and then oxalic acid. I'm just giving you like the big four. Um, and you take those and you rotate them. Of course, Amitraz being a synthetic, I try to shy away from it, but I have used it. It has been effective. Um, and I'll use it if I have to, but I try to shy away from it. I'd rather use something of a natural um, product as opposed, and I'm not talking it down none at all, because it's great to put in nukes, and it's easy. So
Yeah, that makes sense. That's where we're at, the whole big learning curve, and I think the go is to not try the things that didn't work. That would be a good place to start.
right, yeah, absolutely. There's no point in starting where we've made the benchmarks,
Yeah, stand on the shoulders of giants, I think was the saying.
Yeah, we learn from our mistakes. You might be 20 years behind, but you're also 20 years ahead of where we were. So
that's a good point. I tell you what, yeah, and there was a few mistakes made along the way. I think even the New Zealanders made a few blunders on some of their treatment stuff. But
right.
I am not going to get too overconfident because we're just a couple of years in yet. So
You'll be fine. Just be confident. Learn. The only way you learn in beekeeping is to make mistakes or anything in life. And if you make a mistake, just be confident in the mistake you made and learn from it. And that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, no, I think you're on the money, because it's like all of this stuff. It's about the bit like the first time I found foul brood, I went, oh my goodness me, and then you change to learn to look for it, and you can basically see it a lot quicker once you know what it looks like.
Once you know what it looks like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you go through the book, and I remember going through the books and looking at the pictures and all the rest of it, and I swear it looks different in the hive than it does in those pictures.
The lighting's not as good in the pictures.
It might be what it is.
I don't know.
No. Oh, golly gosh. The powers that be, maybe we'll see what the audience, whether they've got some questions for us, whether we
Okay.
Yeah. What do we got? Paul's going to ask us a question. He says, do you think the Australian authorities will have the chemicals registered in time for us to use? Oh, Paul, now there's a very good question. One would hope. I'm thinking from what I can hear, they've got some treatments in New South Wales for the hives that are in the red zone. So one would assume it's in the country, but yeah, I mean, that decision is probably above my pay grade, but you'd hope they would have it ready for us since we've gone to management now. I don't know. How did you get on over there, Chris? Did they have the treatments organised when
I started, treatments were done organized. I think that most folks were using Apistan and Apivar, and they've been around for a little while. There were different management practices back then. They were treating once a year, and then that treatment wears out after a little bit of time, and so we've learned that hey, we're gonna have to do something to clean these mites up and get through the winter. You treat too early, and then it doesn't. Your mite populations are too high when you come through fall into winter. So you may have to do some little treatments in during the winter. So yeah, it's changed dramatically. We had mites when I started, so I'm just used to it.
That's a fair cop. I was sort of one of the things that I was a bit concerned about is that we've decided to transition to management in our spring, and perhaps we maybe should have treated them in the winter. But anyway, we will see where we go from here.
Right, right. Well, you know how to catch swarms, or if you got a few colonies, split them and go.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's Michelle got to say for us? Are there different methods to use to treat? And what methods are there? There you go. Well, I think we just mentioned a few of them a minute ago, but there's, oh, mate, you could rattle those names off pretty easy, I reckon.
Yeah, there's apivar, which are strips that go into colonies. They're pretty easy. That's a 42-day treatment. And then there's Apiguard, which is a thymol gel. That one is this is the prescribed treatment here in the States. I don't think it would vary too much for you guys. But then it's two 50-gram treatments, 14 days apart. And then formic acid. There's two different ways of applying that. It's either 2 pads for 14 days or 1 pad for 10 days and then 1 pad for another 10 days. And then the approved way that we do it here for the oxalic acid, we use, oh my goodness, apibioxyl oxalic acid. And it's, I believe it's 1 gram per box. So if you got a double deep, you use 2 grams. It may be 2 grams. I can't speak to it now because now I've forgotten numbers and I put this stuff out every day.
That's all right.
But anyways, there's you turn it from a solid into a gas and it covers the bees, and is pretty effective at the phoretic mites or the mites on the bees. So those are the methods that I use.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, and obviously it's successful, and that's the other thing. It'll be different in every, I guess, environment and different places for when there's a brood break or how cold it is, or.
Well, the Apiguard and the formic acid actually just inherently cause a brood break because the queens, just kind of like it stresses. There's some stress associated with those, but they're temperature sensitive. So you have to be careful in your application, what time, when you apply those two miticides. Be aware of what temperature ranges are supposed to be because those are on the labels, and that's the one thing I'll always point out as you go by what the label tells you. Follow that label direction.
Yeah, because I did hear if you use some of the treatments and it's too hot, the bees will abscond and whoosh off out of the hive and land in a tree and say, I don't like the smell of that.
I was applying formic acid this summer, and it was like 90 degrees. But there are some tricks to doing that, and and you learn those, by communicating with other beekeepers. Randy Oliver is a prominent researcher beekeeper here, in the States, and I follow some of his practices, and he's a scientificbeekeeping.com, and he was been a real world of knowledge, and you can do different things, but you still just got to follow that label.
Yeah, that's probably why there's a label. That makes perfectly good sense.
Right.
Fred's just wondering, when's the best time for us to treat our hives?
When you need to.
Yeah.
You monitor and you find out when you need to treat.
Yeah.
More often than not, you want to have most of your treatments done, before the winter solstice. You want to be at least about finished by fall. That's the way it is here. And definitely finished, for the most part. You can do some just kind of the formic acid is really great through our winters because they're broodless. You try to hit the bees when they're broodless, with the formic acid because it only kills the mites on the bees. It doesn't penetrate into the cells. So I think anytime you need to treat is a great time to treat.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, exactly right. And you don't want to over-treat, and as you said, because then you're basically wasting chemicals, money, and effort. That's why you do the alcohol wash and do your numbers and add them up. And oh golly gosh, it sounds like a fun exercise. I'm glad I'm glad I haven't got 10,000 hives. I don't know how those boys get on.
Oh, I can only imagine. I know the difficulty I have with the 100 that I've got.
Yeah, exactly right. You start thinking, I don't know, exponential growth. I'm thinking, wow. I mean, there is still a lot of bigger commercial beekeepers in the States, so I guess they've figured out some way to make it happen.
They have, you know, and I guess that's why we have to be such a community, Mark, is because you got people moving bees, and they're working hard to keep their bees clean and the low mites, and they're coming and dropping off here and there, and if I'm not managing my colonies to the best of my ability, maybe I'm setting mites off into their colonies, if they go and rob and this and that and the other, and you just that's the task at hand, is getting everybody on board to do some sort of management practice. So but there's still commercial operations thriving, doing well. They've got a management practice in to where they can keep those mite levels low and their bee colonies high, and that's really what it boils down to, is you're just managing a bee colony and keeping the mite populations low. That's just the concept. And if you can grasp that concept and go at it from that angle, and then follow those basic things, you're going to be successful. It's
no. Well,
but there's work behind all them words.
Oh yeah. I can see that already. There's plenty of work to be involved, but even so, it is. What was your statement earlier in the conversation? Is we're bee might no, you called it something other than beekeeping. It's sort of
husbandry.
Husbandry, that's the word. Yes, definitely. We're definitely going to be more in the brood box than we have been in the last.
Well, I mean, husbandry is an ethical. It's just taking care of something in an ethical way. Being, whether like an organism, and bees they're not much in one or two, but you put a a bunch of bees together, you have a super organism, and you have an ethical responsibility to take care of them.
Yes,
absolutely,
no, definitely. Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Well, once you put your label on the front of the box, they're yours, and so then you've got to take care of them.
That's right.
And Tony's just asking us, is it correct that New South Wales has moved from eradication to control? And yeah, I can answer that question. Yes, Tony, they have. They're saying it's transitioning to control or management. They're calling it transitioning to management. So whatever transitioning means is anybody's guess, but I would imagine management's definitely on the list.
Oh, that's positive. I'm glad to hear that,
Yeah. No, I feel for the players in the mess that have been burnt out and had their whole lives turned upside down. I don't know how they come back from there. I've read a few articles about beekeepers that are slightly older than me. They're like 65 or something, and they're going, well, I'm not really sure. After all this excitement, I'm not sure if I want to go again.
It's kind of disheartening, when everything you've worked out, whether you're a hobbyist, whether you're a sideliner or commercial, as you said, we love the little gals, and when they're gone, it's you've lost something, and it's hard to bounce back from that.
You'd have no excuse to go for that long drive to see if the flowers were somewhere or other, and you say to the wife, I'll be back tomorrow, and they'll go, where are you going? I have no idea, but I'm going to see where I'm going to go for a bit of a cruise.
Right.
Golly gosh. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Chris. The powers that be, I reckon we're on the go. I hopefully we can put some links to your stuff in the chat room and see.
Sure.
And I'm wishing you all the best there in Kentucky, and I hope your winter goes well.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you.
It's been great. Good on you, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
Good on you. Bye.
Bye.